Good morning! I'm Cleofe,
I'm Lumat.
and this is a comparative stylistic analysis of
Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper.
and Basha's The Aged Mother. Stylistic analysis in linguistics refers to the identification of patterns of usage in speech and writing. The Yellow Wallpaper, written by Charlene Perkins Gilman, and The Aged Mother, written by Matsuo Basho, examine their style of writing in their literary texts. In both texts, the former is non-fictional short story, and the latter is a fictional story that has roots of non-fiction.
The literary style of The Yellow Wallpaper is that of the unreliable narrator from only one point of view. The literary style of The Yellow Wallpaper is that of the unreliable narrator from only one point of view. The narrative is told from a first-person viewpoint, and so there is no way of knowing whether the reader gets the whole thing. The narrative can only be seen from one perspective without a second point of view or even the third-person form of narration, the narrator, who first suffers from postpartum depression and from an exceedingly serious mental breakdown.
While in The Aged Mother, the point of view of the story was in the third-person point of view, because the author is the one who narrates the story, and she is not included in the characters of the story. It is written of the third-person point of view because the author wrote freely.
Charlotte Perkins Gilman lived with her aunts, one of which was an early suffragist.
Suffragist. Yun yan eh. Ulit.
Charlotte Perkins Gilman lived with her aunts, one of which was an early suffragist and the other was the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet Beecher Stowe. These people helped her value both writing and feminist movement and later influenced her short stories and essays. Like most women of her time, Perkins Gilman married and had a child. After the birth of her daughter, she suffered from postpartum depression. This influenced her most famous piece of writing, The Yellow Wallpaper, which is about a woman suffering from this same disease. An early article that could be related in the story of The Yellow Wallpaper is The Depression and Anxiety in Labor Migrants and Refugees, a systematic review and meta-analysis by Lindert. As I have read that the main character has been diagnosed by some kind of mental illness and it did not take too long for her to have anxiety and depression. Like in the first article, depression and anxiety in labor migrants and refugees, it is said there that prevalence of anxiety and depression among migrants vary among studies, and it's been found that prevalence of depression and anxiety may be linked to financial strain in the country of immigration. If I compare this article to the poem The Yellow Wallpaper, the main character had been stressed out of work but eventually took a break from work to ease her condition. The cause of anxiety and depression is the workplace, but the cause of depression and anxiety on the first article is the immigrants' problem was the financial strain and it made them anxious about their environment.
Japanese folktale, also known as The Aged Mother, tells the story of an unkind ruler who issues cruel orders, including a requirement that all old people will be abandoned and left to die. Basho tells a poignant tale of mother and her son and their love of each other. The scholarly article that could be related in the story of The Aged Mother is The Power of a Mother's Love by Savage J. 2007. Sheila K. shares the lesson her mother imparted to her and her other loved ones in her book. If not for the love of mother, author K accounts what it was like growing up under the care of her loving and supportive mother. There is no doubt that the mother's actions hold a significant degree of influence in their children's future choices. Now, upon comparing this to The Aged Mother, obviously, it shows the unconditional love of a mother of its offspring. It is said in the message of the story that the love of a mother can be defined by anything. The article comes in here. Even though that his son had the courage to leave her to die, she does not mind that he tried to do that to her, because she knows he's just following orders so that he won't get in trouble. Again, The love of a mother cannot be defined by anything or anyone.
The study uses a stylistic approach to examine the similarities and differences between the writing styles of two short story writers. The study is mainly qualitative because it is based on traits and characteristics. The narrator plays a similar role in the yellow wallpaper, as it is embodied voice speaking for the community. More important than the feminist undertones of the plot, though, is the suggestion that the narrator is only identified in comparison to her husband. She lacks her own concrete identity. This Japanese folk tale, The Story of the Aged Mother, tells the story of an unkind dictator giving cruel commands, including a demand that all elderly people be deserted and left to die. Basho tells a touching tale of a woman and her son and their love for each other. The study aims at analyzing the structure of Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper and Basho's The Aged Mother short stories. It plays an essential part in literary work which explores the plot, settings, characters, conflict, and other elements of the story. Instead of that, by conducting this analysis, it could make the narration comprehensible for the readers and also to catch the meaning which the writer wants to convey. The yellow wallpaper was given by a woman that is trying to enjoy her vacation with his husband in a big house after giving birth to her daughter. The woman was diagnosed with some kind of mental illness that is called postpartum hysteria. This was caused of too much stress in her work area. The woman loves to write, but her husband suggests that she should stop writing at the moment, but she still writes secretly to ease her own boredom. When they got to the house, she immediately noticed that the house is very big from the inside. Nothing to be worried about. But then she noticed the yellow wallpaper in the room that they were going to sleep in. At first, she pays no mind about the wallpaper, but then she starts to see something that only she can see. She sees a pattern of a woman. It looks like that a woman is trapped in the wallpaper and desperately wants to get out of there. Then she started to see that she and the woman has a lot in common. Her husband doesn't want her to get out of the house, same with the woman in the wallpaper, as if they are both imprisoned and has no chance of getting out of the house. Although her husband does not want her to be isolated, but he is doing that for her own good and for the sake of her mental health. As time passed by, the woman began to act very different. She tends to sleep all day and then stays up all night just observing the girl in the wallpaper. And as the time comes that she finally decided to rip up the wallpaper so that the woman can get out, she locked the door and began to rip up the wallpaper. Her husband's sister came knocking onto the door as hard as she could, but she was unable to open the door. Later, she contacted her brother and said that he has to come home. When her brother came, he does the same thing. He knocked as hard as he could, then the door broke. When they entered the room, the wallpaper was ripped off and the hands of his wife. They were covered in blood. And his wife claims that the woman was free. The woman imprisoned in the wallpaper was free.
The Aged Mother by Matsuo Basho is a Japanese folktale. There lived a cruel ruler of the land who despises anything of failing health and strength. He made a proclamation to have the elderly sent to the mountain called Obatsuyama, or the mountain where the aged are abandoned, and leaves them to die. In that land lived a man and his old widowed mother, who are the foot of the mountain. Upon hearing the proclamation, the man was compelled to send the mother he loves to the mountain. By the time he reached the summit, just before he climbed down to the mountain, he was advised by his mother to follow the twig she left laying on the ground while he was going up to the mountain. He could not bear leaving her, so he went home with his mother and hid her beneath the floor where he tended her. One day, the ruler wanted to boast his power and ordered anyone, even his wise men, to make a robe of ashes, which the son did with the help of his mother's wisdom. He made a rope by twisted straw and burned the rope stretched on a row of flat stones on a windless night. Knowing that he did not do it alone, he told the ruler that it was with the wisdom of his elderly mother that he was able to do such impossible task.
First, the ruler imprisoned the man, but eventually he came to his senses and cited the saying, "With a crown of snow, there cometh wisdom." Hence, the proclamation was abolished, and custom was long gone. Its literary movement is realism. The situation in the story was once happened in the history of Japan, not by putting to death the aged people, but abandoning them. It views the once history of a certain country and the simplicity of life. The story also contains lesson, and the language used was simple and comprehensive. A mother's love is something that no one can explain. It is made of deep devotion, of sacrifice and pain. It is endless and unselfish. This describes the problem, research design, and the findings. In the yellow wallpaper, the struggle over the essence and care of her condition between the narrator and her husband, who is also her psychiatrist, leads to a dispute within the mind of the narrator between her increasing knowledge of her own powerlessness and her ability to repress this realization. In The Aged Mother, the tale's dispute was when the daimyo ordered the execution of the old people. When daimyo proclaimed the ruler that all the elders must be put to death, the love of the mother was seen in their condition. The order filled the poor farmer's spirit. Since he loved his mother so much, he was so lonely. The study attempted to examine the writing style of Charlotte Perkins Gilman and Matsuo Basho to find out what kinds of different stylistic categories they used to fabricate their stories. Therefore, the study focused on writers' style of writing and their literary text. It used qualitative appropriate for displaying the writer's use of traits and characteristics of their stories. The author Charlotte Perkins Gilman was social change lecturer in the development of the yellow wallpaper, as well as the themes and symbolism in the plot. Her values and ideologies play a significant role. Later female authors were also impacted by the yellow wallpaper. The writer assumes that at the end of the tale that the lady came from the wallpaper. It reveals that the character has eventually merged fully into her insanity and became one with the house and domesticated frustration. The story of The Aged Mother is a folktale from Japan. The tale teaches us two essential virtues, wisdom and devotion. Mother's love is nothing that can be contrasted or measured. It is genuine, selfless, and reverent. We may honestly claim that beneath Mother's foot we can find paradise, where she fought cruelty with compassion and devotion, and for her true hero to carry out our bravery to confront the hard realities of life. Most of all, our bravery, vulnerability, and determination have driven us to walk through life and to our path.
And that ends our presentation of a comparative stylistic analysis of Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper and Basho's The Aged Mother. Again,
I'm Jomar Lumat.
and I'm Cleofe.